Good afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. I finally got this rebacked and everything, although I didn't realize there were a couple little pieces in the mirror, but you can't tell. But I do have a little something on the glass here I need to get off. But this was hanging in the halls of my school, elementary school, K through 8. Mercy, lay down, lay down. No, lay down. I'm doing a video now. Not gonna pet you now. And it was in memory of an Emma A. favorite who was either Mercy. No, I'm not doing that now, honey. I'm sorry. Who was Mrs. Favorite was a teacher in the school and a tough teacher. So this was either a daughter who had died of hers or her mother, but I'm thinking maybe it was a daughter who she lost. And she was very elderly in the 50s, mid 50s. No, Mercy. No, find a bone to chew. Find a bone. I got bones out for you guys. So, but it's an old painting of Samuel in the temple, and it had actually on the island in the pole barn where everything was stored, because I never did get it unpacked all the time I was on the island, because the whole place had to be gutted and redone. And then I was down to nothing. And even in fact, I had borrowed money, or people had lent me money. I didn't borrow, but they lent me money unasked for my B, and I was so grateful because it's the only way I got through and got out of there. Got it sold and got out and could pay everybody back who had lent me money or gifted me money, even including my spiritual father gifted me $12,000. He did. Money that people had given him over the years that he said was to be used for, they told him, give it to a poor Catholic sometime. And he says, you qualify. When I was out there on that island and didn't realize, I got duped. So, and it was a Catholic real estate agent, very well off. But she would say things like, oh, I could live here. And someone who knew her said she wouldn't have ever lived in that place. So here was a Catholic making amends for a Catholic. She wanted to make the sale or whatever, but it was a beautiful piece of property, though. The land itself was wonderful. And the price was, it was 100, I think I got it for 197. Was just I didn't know. And she didn't tell me. It was basically the cost of what the land would have been without the house. So, but God helped me. We redid it. Anyway, I didn't realize that water got into the pole barn. So it drenched some boxes. It did get some books too. But this didn't total the books, but it damaged them. But this had gotten water damage. That's why the back was off and it was all bent and I had to work on it. But I got it going. This is the painting that I found this at a yard sale in my hometown. Evidently in the 70s, when I was gone, the 70s and the 80s, they had stripped the schools of any religious art that was hanging in the hallways for decades. It had been there. My parents went to that school, even. So it was, I think it was built in 1928. So, and it was built where another school had been prior to that. And my parents were there in the old school for a few years and then in the newer school in 1928. And my parents were in high school 1930 to 1933. My mother, I think she graduated in 35. My dad graduated in 33. And my mother in 34. My dad was double promoted when he was like in second grade or something, second or third grade. And they were going to double promote me, but it's fine. They didn't. I don't know. I don't care. Whatever. I liked school. I liked everything. I just liked activity. But I use the word termagant in the term in the form of the word meaning turbulent. I am haphazardly turbulent. I'm adrift right now. I have been. I can't seem to focus. I can't seem to accomplish anything. I just wander. I wander on the internet. I look up this religious site, and then from there I go out, research this or that. Or I look at the news, but then I get too involved in it. I'm still praying a lot about that situation in Minneapolis, here in the United States, of the woman. And she didn't have even a portion of Down syndrome. Her facial features looked that way. But they have a video now of her talking. She's totally competent. She was. She just made stupid decisions. And really, it's sad. Unwise. And she did, though, follow what this other woman told her to do. Even in driving away when she was going to be arrested. You don't flee when you're going to be arrested. That's trouble right there. You don't park crosswise in a street to block traffic. It's illegal. So protest is wonderful. Has to be legal protest in this country, and I think any country in the world. So they were breaking the law. They started out making stupid decisions and got stupidly killed. The one woman did, because they have a new video now that shows her just straight at the police, at the ICE officer. You don't do that. Well, she did. So, but anyway, it's upsetting. And so that, I let the world see. The world is distracting me. And although, maybe God wants me to take this time to feel the sorrow, to suffer the sorrows of the world. Why not suffer the sorrows of the world? Well, here's one reason why not. It takes you adrift, or it can, and it has me. So I would be, it's enough of it. Enough of it. Then I read about this dentist and his wife. They've arrested the person who killed them, murdered them in Cincinnati, Ohio, or Columbus, Ohio. They had 2 little children in the home. The children were asleep, but they were murdered in the night. Their parents were a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, or a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, or something, very young little children. And they were in the home, and their mom and dad were dead. Woke up in the morning, and their mommy and daddy were shot to death. And the man was a dentist. I don't know. The wife she had a degree, but was a stay-at-home mom. And just awful. Well, who did it? It was her ex-husband. She had married a man in 2015, a surgeon, a vascular surgeon. Married him. They were divorced in under 2 years. So obviously, mistake. She made a mistake. Or he did. But we can assume now she's the one that realized. She divorced him. She remarried in 2020. 3 years after the divorce, she remarried. Happily married. They had 2 children. And a beautiful woman. This first surgeon she married was not all so good looking now, but you could tell just his face and his eyes and everything. He'd gone wacko. And then the article said that he had lived in several states since 2020. So a surgeon usually doesn't live in several states in 5 years. it showed that he had fallen apart. His ego or something couldn't take the divorce, the rejection. Or he was goofy to begin with, and she realized mistake marrying him. Personality aberration or some such thing. Who knows? A controller or whatever. Obviously, he could not take it that he was divorced. It must have messed up his career for him to move so many times in 5 years. And he came one night and killed them between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Sure, they have the time frame down to the exact within a half hour or something now, but 2 children without a mom and dad, and they were happily married. So it's just, I get too involved, but that's another example of, so yes, so that they have the man's mugshot, this former vascular surgeon. He's not going to do well in prison. Maybe insanity will be his plea, but he hadn't been doing well in life, obviously, to have to move around so much. And whatever happened of his surgeon career. Unstable, emotionally unstable, couldn't take the rejection of the woman divorcing him. I mean, that's what it looks like. That's my instinct on it from that. But see, I get, and I'm tired, I'm not sleeping, so I need a routine. I need to put myself on what's called an horarium. I used to not need one. I need one right now in this time period that I'm in, this turbulent, haphazard turbulence that I'm in. And Lovey's picking on it. He's been running around. We can't even hear. Mercy's quiet and peaceful, and all of a sudden he's running to the door or running around, starts to bark. So he's feeling my turbulence, my haphazard turbulence. So tonight I'm going to have to bite the bullet and just turn off the light and go to sleep. Often I'll doze off and then the light will be on and I'll wake up and then I can't get back to sleep because of pain. But I've stayed on the pain meds today at a reasonable time span, and but just not accomplishing anything. I even tried, I got my eyebrows back on. They were off. Yesterday I noticed they were off. And I had, cleaned my face and stuff, so off they went. And so I thought, maybe that'll help me focus. But, I don't have mirrors around, so, but I have one mirror, and you have to scrunch down to see it, sort of, because it's just leaning on a wall. But I realized, maybe that would help. Put my eyebrows on and get a grip here. Get a grip. And get with it. Maybe my diet or something. I don't have a particularly good diet. Well, I guess it's okay. It's just liquefied stuff. But I don't know. Maybe too much whirl, too much temporal. I've also been having lots of flashbacks of childhood growing up. And then today of my 2 older sisters and situations that happened. So I was writing about that. And if you have 3 girls, there's usually 2, and then the one is sort of off, and I was the off later. The sister next to me, we did things as youngsters, but she was always melancholy. Ended up she has clinical depression and anxiety disorder all her life, really, basically. But my earliest memories are of her being melancholy and me trying to cheer her up. So, became the codependent type, to try bring the peace, cheer up, keep things calm, try to get her to do something, be happy. But of course I didn't succeed, but I think that became part of her MO her modus operandi also. Her way fed into it. And sort of being the victim then, or whatever. And I was her size even. I was a robust child. Not heavy or anything, just exuberant and like to do things and hands-on, and wanted to keep up with my older sisters some, but ended up the oldest one got boy crazy and into makeup to an extreme. That's why I tend not to wear. That affected me. I wanted to get to school earlier. I'd get up and I'd have to get up extra early, or I couldn't even get into the bathroom. We had one bathroom with 3 girls, which was fine, except the boy crazy one was really into her hair and her makeup. She's beautiful, but too much, it was just, really was a turnoff for me. And I felt like I lost her. I lost a human being because she was so gone. And also she was disruptive. She would, do things that would get mom's temper going, or dad's temper even. I mean, he would finally. And I didn't like that. I wanted peace and just get along, do what you're told. I'm that kind of person. That's why these things get to me when people do dumb stuff, just it causes trouble for themselves and for other people. Just get along, protest, but with your signs on the side of the road. Don't break the laws, please. Causes trouble, and then you get into trouble. And it doesn't do any good. It just makes protesters seem stupid, because it doesn't become the protest anymore. It becomes about them and the laws they've broken, or the trouble they've caused, or the person dead then. Totally forgotten about what the protest was about. Now it's all about this person getting killed. And why she would, aim, and she did. They've got the video now. He had a camera going, and you see the car is just, and you hear the bump, and he seems to fall, or at least get hit. You hear it. So, and then aims for him. She drives straight, then turns. And what a shame. What a loss of life. But they weren't doing they had lived in several states. They just go from state to state doing protests. Probably on welfare or something, unemployment. She and her lady husband, and 3 kids she had, so collecting for them, probably collecting welfare for them. And because the one husband was dead, or I don't think she was married to him, but had a baby 6 years ago with the man. So that man's dad is coming to take the child, to rear the child. Well, that's good. If the grandfather hopefully is responsible and will, probably a good thing for the child. Rather than to be living with these women that they're on, sucking up the system and out protesting. But they get paid for it. They get cash for the protesting. They work for some group, but just, that's sad, even, to be a hired protester. If you really believe, you'd go out and do it, because of the cause, not for the cash, not because you have sort of like this instinct of liking to just be obdurate or something. That was disappointing. I'm so idealistic. So I'm turning to Peter of Alcantara. He was in Spain. He was Teresa of Avila's spiritual director. So this is my effort to get focused. Somebody who's good, who's idealistic and pure and lives the ideal and did in his life and taught and helped this saint also. Oh, I think Mercy has to go to the bathroom now. I'll get started at least when she gets to the frantic point we'll have to stop it. Probably good to split this up because I've already spent time in my haphazard turbulence talking about these other things, but it's what got me off kilter. And I can't do that. So I'm going to put myself on an horarium. It's going to have a loosely structured horarium because of my pain. I can't be predictable. But if I bite the bullet and get to sleep and get sleep at night, then I'll still wake up every couple of hours or more, but with the pain and with having to go to the restroom and stuff. But at least I will have a better, get the light off, because light is supposed to impede sleep. And so I got to make sure that I get the light off. Doze off, or if I wake up, then turn it off. And then at least maybe wake up an hour or two earlier, and then I'll set an horarium for a certain time. And if I have to adapt it an hour or something, that's okay. But I need to do something. This isn't working. I feel scattered. I'm squandering the gift of time God has given me. And not getting other work done at all. It's basically feeding the dogs and making heating up my pureed soup that I make extra runny, and my runny cream of rice. Did I have eggs this morning? Yes, I had some eggs this morning. So, that's hermit or not. I need to get a grip here. And, better get my time. My mother had a timer I'll get that timer out. Set it. Glance at the news, give myself 5 minutes. And not get into these articles, and not get my empathy or my instinct going on what happened and why and all the ramifications that I get into with it. And also, I need to curb my text to my spiritual friend. I went into all this stuff of family history and of realities that I was facing, of my relationships with my sisters and why it was like that. And the two of them then got more close, which ended up okay. The one sister I was very close with when we were married, and right around my divorce too. Long distance close, but still close and sharing, but she had a big breakdown in 1990. And then she went to therapy, and the therapist started digging around, and I think, and really made my mother a scapegoat problem for my sister. And my mother just bent over backwards trying to help her. But I understand now. See, my mother knew that she was depressed or something, right? And I sensed it even as a 3-year-old or 2.5. I remember my earliest memories, trying to get her to be happy, trying to get her to play or to do something so that she wanted to do that would make her happy. I perceived she wasn't happy, that she was born melancholy, and she wouldn't, and it became a thing. I think it became a way to control for herself, even as a child. And then my mother bought her a canopy double bed with pink eyelet canopy and bedspread, and she got her own room. And wow, because my mom too was trying to bend over backwards. And that sister, she was bright, but she had to study more. Things came very easy for me. And my eldest sister, like I say, she got into boys, and that was pretty much it. But she was very much the first child leader, and would cause trouble, though. She'd buck mom and dad, and dated a Catholic, and sneaked around. That was the bad part. She'd lie and sneak around. And it was always mayhem. My mom would lose her temper. My dad would come home on the weekend and there'd be trouble. Always trouble because of her sneaking around and dating the Catholic, which, anyone, she was very intelligent, my eldest sister, and talented, very gorgeous, and of course she went to college, and within the first week she met the guy she was going to end up marrying and dumped the guy, and he ended up with problems, severe problems, being dumped by her because she tooled him along all through high school, causing trouble at home. Life was not pleasant for me with all that going on. If you're smart, if you're really smart, you'd find someone else to date and just keep the parents calm. Date a Catholic when you're out on your own, If you know that they're anti-Catholic, don't rock the boat. Why? You're going to be adult soon enough. But no, she liked it. She liked all that. Bucking, being her own self and having her own way and creating havoc for the rest of us. So keeping mom in a perpetual fit of temper, and dad too. And she wouldn't get up. She wouldn't make her bed. We were supposed to make our bed. And she would sleep in, and that would cause trouble. Dad would be trying to get ready to go to work and have to deal with her. So all this stuff is coming up. I suppose God needs me to clear it out, forgive everyone, and get all of it out so that I can die and not have as much to deal with in my own judgment. So I've been just all over the place. Back to Peter. Peter was born in Alcantara. It's a province of Quicheras, Extremadura, Spain. His father, Peter Garavita, was the governor of Alcantara, and his mother was of the noble family of Sanabia. He decided to join the Franciscans at the age of 16, and shortly after he was sent to university in Salamanca by his stepfather. So he went to school in Salamanca. He became a Franciscan friar of the stricter observance in the friar at Manzaretes in 1515. So early 16th century. At the age of 22, Peter was sent to found a new community of the stricter observance at Badajoz. He was ordained a priest in 1524. So he had 9 years of schooling, and to be of the stricter observance. Peter of Alcantara did. The following year, Peter was appointed guardian of the friary of Saint Mary of the Angels of Robredo, Old Castile. Castile is getting up in the area of where Teresa of Avila was born and lived. A few years later, after 1524, Peter began preaching with much success. He preferred to preach to the poor. His sermons, taken largely from the prophets and sapiential books, meaning the books of wisdom in the Bible, they breathe the tenderest human sympathy. Well, I guess maybe I'm connecting with Peter. He had tender human sympathy. I do up to a certain point, and then I start griping. I've been sort of ranting about the situation at home with my eldest sister a little bit. Not fair. I mean, she did as she needed to do, I guess. At the time Peter entered the order, the reform of the Descalced friars consisted of the custody of the friaries in Spain and Santa Maria Pietatis in Portugal, all subject to the Minister General of the observance. The observance of the strict observance. So more of the rigorous type of Franciscans. So in 1538, Peter was made minister provincial of the Franciscan province of St. Gabriel of Estremadura, but resigned when his plans to enforce severe rules among the friars were opposed. And he retired with St. John of Avila. That's another saint. I've got a book of his life, St. John of Avila. So he retired with St. John of Avila, Peter did, into the mountains of Arabida in Portugal. Here's a picture of Peter of Alcantara. A statue of him right there. There he is. This is all before he became the Mercy. I got to be able to see so I can think clearly. This was before he met Teresa of Avila. So, Francis Borgia once wrote to Peter of Alcantara, "Your remarkable success is of special comfort to me." In St. Teresa of Avila's book, Peter perceived, or in St. Teresa, in just knowing her, Peter perceived a soul chosen by God for a great work, and her success in the reform of Carmel was in great measure due to his counsel, encouragement, and advocacy. It was a letter from Peter, dated April 14, 1562, that encouraged her to found her first monastery in Avila, Spain. Teresa. It was Peter, a letter to her from Peter that encouraged her to found her first monastery in Avila. So the autobiography of St. Teresa is the source of much of the extant or current remaining information on Peter's life, work, gift of miracles, and prophecy. So he had a gift of miracles, Peter did, including prophecy. According to St. Teresa, it was very common for Peter to eat only once in 3 days, and sometimes he would pass a week without eating. Now, those types of things were popular at the time period, to fast, to not eat often. In fact, Catherine of Siena did the same. It's actually thought that Catherine of Siena developed anorexia from not eating. She became so distracted, so in love with Christ, so wanting to fast, that she fasted more and more and more. And when you start fasting, even if you just eat like 2 meals a day, eventually your body adapts to that. There's no rule that says you have to eat 3 meals a day. I just usually eat twice a day, or Grange eat, just little bits. My body has adapted to that. So if I would try to eat a whole meal now, and the reason I did it is not for religious reasons, it's so that my intestines don't get as easily clogged. Because my intestines aren't moving. They've got a bend in them, for one thing, and then other organs are pressing down that prohibits things from passing through very well. So I have a reason, but I had started doing that without knowing, just knowing that I was in trouble. So to me, there's no point in not eating for religious reasons. It's an austerity, but there are other things we can do to train ourselves in austerities, such as to be on a better schedule and to get more done, to be more productive with the time God gives us. Even more prayer, more focused prayer would be better than wafting through the days, squandering time, distracted, overly distracted, and looking at too many articles and the details of them, filling the mind with that, instead of pondering God, filling the mind with God, or with temporal duties. I have some bills that I need to pay. So, but Peter did this. It was the trend then. And it could, it was an austerity. He was an ascetic, liked to do things, or found it beneficial to cut things out of his life, of the world. And eating back then, we didn't have other things to take our minds or to do. Eating was a big part of life. It was an activity, and it was an important one that people enjoyed. And we're grateful to have food many times. So to cut off food took a lot of discipline. Basically, the religious aspect, the asceticism, is to learn a discipline, to get away from the world, the temporal world, to have more time for God. But we can do that in other ways, as we have learned, because many people, like Catherine of Siena, actually damaged her health and died earlier than she would have because of starving herself to death, in essence. It got to the point where she couldn't eat. She would vomit. She couldn't eat then because her system was shutting down from not eating, from the severity of it. So, and on rare occasion, very rare, God would allow people to exist on very little over time. Padre Pio and others, I'm trying to think. I think it's Saint Paulo, or no, Apollo. It's a hermit. Something of Paulo, Paola. His feast day is April 2nd. I just can't think of his first name. Might be Francis of Paulo. He existed on next to nothing and was fine. Padre Pio would have a slice of bread and some ale at lunch, and that was it. He was in the confessional all the time. But of course, he wasn't using up a lot of fuel, so he didn't need as much fuel. But he wasn't skin and bones by any means. But his mind was so with God, his body literally didn't need a lot of nutrition. And he lived to be 81. So he's one of the unusual cases, as was Francis of Paola. So, and there were a few others. And some lived on the Eucharist. Now, they say like Catherine of Siena did, but she worked herself up into a hysteria, in my opinion, and from what I've read a lot of stuff, including something that was written more recently, but went over a lot of documentation in Vatican documents that were released in the early 2000s. So this woman did a doctoral dissertation on it. And likely she did develop an eating disorder. Catherine did. But she got into the trend of the day and into sort of a hysteria of love of Christ. Went a little bit mad. Not totally, but into the exuberance of starving herself as an asceticism, to show her love, to show her extreme devotion, and thought it was good, and people were impressed, It was, and she did have mystical experiences. Now there you could sort of wonder, but she had ecstasies, in fact, during Mass. But it was said that the host would one time came to her through the air, into her mouth, whether that was a tale that was told, an exaggeration, or an accuracy, I do not know. But she did die, I think, at age 32 or 33. And, of course, that was made at the time of, Her Holiness, she died at the year Christ died, because she was so close to Christ. Well, we don't know. It could have been she did so much damage by not eating that, because that can harm your body. Because she was still, expected for a while at home to do cleaning and to keep up her chores and things. But she was very holy. She loved God. And it was part of what people did then, the asceticism, in extreme ways. So he was a man of remarkable austerity and poverty who traveled throughout Spain preaching the gospel to the poor. So he was more of an unusual, to have the energy to travel. Catherine of Siena did not have energy then. She ended up, pretty much bedridden. So it broke her health. But she was fine. She loved God so much that she looked forward to being with God. So it wasn't as if she was not genuinely in love with God. She was. She just went along with the times, with the trend of asceticism. And to an extreme, she did. She did to an extreme. Which takes a lot of effort and devotion to actually do that. A lot of discipline, self-discipline. She took what's called the discipline, where they would beat themselves with straps and then put bits of metal in the straps to actually draw blood, to scourge themselves. I did that for a short while. Well, and my spiritual director knew. I told him, my dear spiritual but I said, I just want to see what it was like, why these saints would do something like that. I just used, my son had left a belt that had a big buckle, so I would just use that and would hit my back with it at night. Not for long. I think I only did it a couple of nights, and realized that it was pointless, that there were other things that God would prefer, that I would spend that time praying or spend that time reading scripture, better uses of time. And my spiritual father did tell me, he says, well, go ahead, see what it's like. If you want to know what it's like to hit yourself in the back with a strap. And, but he says, it's what I've always told you. Don't go looking for added suffering. You don't need it. God has already brought you plenty with your back pain. And also with your whole life. With, being kicked out of parishes and persecuted as you are. He says, you have more suffering of all types than anyone I know. But, so I tried, I think it was a couple of nights, maybe 5 times, I would, just see and I would pray, and ask God to forgive me if this was offending him. God knew, I just wanted to see, why would they have that as a trend? And was there any efficacy to it? It didn't make me any more, I was very disciplined person. So anyway, but that was something they would do then. They would make a cat o' nine tails. They would call 9 straps, and then it would have the pieces of metal in it. And it was used scourging Jesus. That was the reason why they wanted to see what Jesus experienced. That was another reason I told my spiritual father. I wanted to see what it was like for Jesus to be scourged, to experience everything my beloved experienced. So, but I'm not crucifying myself. I learned, just do what God gives us. He gives us the trials that he knows are best for us, that will teach us the most in discipline and in empathy and in understanding and in closeness to Christ. We don't have to go through everything that Christ went through. God will provide what we need to get close to God, get close to Christ. So he wrote a treatise on prayer and meditation, which I have and have read. It was considered a masterpiece by St. Teresa. She used it as her bedtime reading. When I'd read that in her autobiography called Life, My Life, it's very good if you haven't read it. And her Way of Perfection is really good. Of the two, I think read Way of Perfection. And then her Interior Castles is excellent on the levels of spiritual development and prayer, but spiritual growth. But yeah, so I got that because I want what she read at night. And it is very good, his treatise on prayer and meditation. While in prayer and contemplation, see, he's one to lead on to contemplation, he was often seen in ecstasies and levitation. On his deathbed, he was offered a glass of water, which he refused, saying that even my Lord Jesus Christ thirsted on the cross. See, that would be something that I think I would like to try if I were on my deathbed, to experience Christ's thirst. But it's not a driving force in me. What's more important to me on my deathbed is that I am praying and that I am loving God every moment, and that I am asking forgiveness for my sins of my life, any that I hadn't thought of, which I think a lot of this stuff coming up from childhood and with aunts and uncles or different situations, God is trying to get me to clear things out and to forgive others, forgive myself, look back at it and let go of it, not have anything in me that's lurking of the past, like Isaiah 54, God says, do not look in the past. So Peter died on October 18th, 1562 in a monastery at Arenas, now Arenas de San Pedro, in province of Avila, Old Castile, Spain. It is also said that Peter slept very little, and that he always slept sitting up, because he was awake most of the time when his brother friars were sleeping. He is the patron saint of night watchmen. Well, see, that was one of his austerities, was to deprive himself of sleep. And probably he was thinking and imitating Jesus the night in the garden, when he stayed up, and the times that Jesus would stay up at night and pray, would pray during the night. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to imitate Christ or to experience what he experienced briefly. But we have to understand we're not God. We're humans. And if we want to have productive lives, unless God is providing a grace of a miracle that we don't need sleep, or if we're born with an inclination that we just don't need that much sleep. Otherwise, we should do as human beings do. We're human. Embrace our humanness and wear that as a cross, that we are humans and that we are temporal and that we do, that we accept that we aren't going to counter nature. We can find discipline in other ways, like not frittering away the day we do have, or not dozing off at night and then having a hard time going back to sleep when we wake up. And instead of turning off the light, distract ourselves with something else, or get up and make runny cream of rice at 3 a.m. or something. See, that's not discipline. Yes, of course, I was hungry. So it's not bad, It wasn't a terrible thing, but then it took longer to go back to sleep because I was wide awake then. But I wasn't doing anything productive or purposeful, really. I wasn't. So I listened to music to help me get back to sleep. But had I gone to sleep at an hour, turned the light off before I dozed off, when I was that tired, turn the. So see, there's ways that we can have our discipline that's more reasonable. But I'm going to ask St. Peter of Alcantara to help me not fear going to. I don't like waking up with my arms so terrible. It's excruciating, and it has become like a block to me that's why I don't want to go to sleep. I keep waking up like, move it, get up, move around so it won't go that way. Because it's something to do with my neck and my upper back that's causing pinched nerves. So, okay, let's see what this next section is. His legacy. He was beatified in Rome by Pope Gregory XV on April 18th, 1622, and canonized by Pope Clement IX on April 28th, 1669. I noticed they have a lot of these beatifications and canonizations in the spring, probably because of weather. Nicer weather for people to be there. In 1670, his feast day was set as October 19th, the day after his death, because in the general Roman calendar, October 18th was already the feast day of St. Luke the Evangelist, which would take precedence. The 1969 revision of that calendar omitted his name because of what it saw as the limited importance of the feast on a worldwide level, while at the same time it expressly envisioned its inclusion in local calendars. Well, that's just a nice way of saying they decided he wasn't important enough to take a whole day, October 19th, my grandmother's death date, as a feast for the whole world, which I think is a shame because he was a great soul. I wish they would just have, I've already said, we declare people saints who are holy and wonderful and have as many as there are people. If there's that many holy people, have them all be saints and celebrate them, or let people celebrate them. Give them a day, put it on a calendar. There can be 500 people per day, 5,000 people per day. Who cares? The more the better. But, nobody asked me. So anyway, his feast could thus be moved to his day of death, October 18th, which is now its official date. But some traditional Catholics continue to observe versions of the Roman general Roman calendar of the 1670 to 1969 period, which is just sort of being like, I don't know, just don't want to go along with the flow of what's been decided by the group. Having their own protest. Nope, we don't want to change it. We want to have it how it was, even though that wasn't his date of death. So I guess, it was nice that they did allow it to be the same as St. Luke's Day. I was mistaken there. So they did put it back to October 18th. So he is still important to them. Good. He is to me. After I read a little bit more about him, I'd read his book, which I liked, but, just the life he lived is inspiring. The discipline he had. Even if he, without not eating, even just all of his travels to develop and found the discount, to help the Carmelites. And, well, he was Franciscan, but to travel around and do such good work under difficult circumstances in his time period That's meritorious. Alone. So, in the 1962 Roman Missal that Pope Benedict XVI permitted to be used by all Latin Church priests for masses without the people, and the conditions indicated in Article 5 of his motu proprio summorum pontificum in masses with the people. So, in other words, they loosened up the rules so that the people who wanted to have the Latin rite, to have certain ways to be the way people wanted it at the time. Let me get to the next part here. Some traditionalist Catholics continue to observe versions of the general Roman calendar in the well into the 1962 Roman Missal. They had different conditions, they had different articles that they added, and they had certain ways of doing things in the masses with the people in the Latin Church. This gets into more of the nitty-gritty of people wanting things a certain way in their masses since 1969. So I don't get too involved in all that. The politics of the church and things of the temporal church. I just don't. I've got enough other things to learn, other disciplines, other ways of being, of living life in love and glorifying God and things like that. Peter of Alcantara is the patron saint of nocturnal adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. In 1826, he was named patron saint of Brazil, and in 1962, the fourth century of his death, of the Spanish region of Extremadura, he is also venerated as patron saint of various parishes in the United States and the Philippines. The town of San Pedro de Alcantara in the province of Malaga is named after him. So see here, I'm reading further, and he was indeed highly respected by the church and given his due, given his honor. So let's see, they have a St. Peter of Alcantara Cathedral, St. Peter of Alcantara Parish Church in the Philippines, Diocese of Shrewsbury Cathedral, and St. Peter of Alcantara, United Kingdom. So a miracle of St. Peter of Alcantara was his ability to pass over rapid rivers with dry feet and to miraculously receive food from heaven when his brethren were starving. So he had mystical graces that came to him to go over rapid rivers with his dry feet, because he was traveling around spreading Christ and helping the foundations, helping build the religious order. Other reported miracles include the staff in his care suddenly became a flourishing fig tree, and a root of snow forming above him during a blizzard, so he wouldn't be suffocated. He was also known for his gift of levitation, often seen raised in the air during prayer. So, amazing, really. He could walk over fast-flowing rivers without getting wet. He would receive food from heaven for his community. The other brothers, they would be hungry. That's one reason why Peter didn't eat that often. His brothers in the religious order, they didn't have that much food to eat. So they would eat sparingly, all of them. A fig tree, after fixing his staff into the ground, he had a staff made out of just wood, and he would drive it into the ground. It instantly would become a fruit-bearing fig tree, so they would have fruit to eat, figs to eat. A snow roof. While journeying in the snowstorm, he once entered a ruined house where the snow in the air formed a protective roof above him. It was an old ruined house that didn't have a roof anymore, but the snow created a roof without any structure under it that protected them. That's quite a miracle. Levitation. He was frequently seen levitating, raised into the air while in a state of prayer or ecstasy. We'd already mentioned those. This goes into a little more detail on levitation. On one occasion, he was carried through the air to a large cross where he prayed with his arms outstretched. So the cross was up in a church, way up high. And Peter was lifted up, carried over, and he was able to put his arms out. Now, as far as crucifixion, that's something I would do when I would be like 4 years old, 3 or 4. We had this old house, and it had the very narrow oak floors. And I liked laying down on the upstairs floor. There was it was an Italianate house, old house, built in the early 1880s, this house that I grew up in. And I would be at the top floor, not just a landing. I could stretch out, but I was only 3 years old, 4 at the oldest. And I liked to lay on that floor. At this certain point, the wood floors would go in one direction, and then there would be a piece of wood going across the other way. And then there would be another stretch of oak. So I would like to lay down on the straight pieces like it was a cross, and then have my arms stretched out on another piece of wood that went crosswise in the inlaid wood floors. And I would writhe around on the floor, leave my arms out, and have my feet like I'd seen in a crucifix, because the neighbors, being Catholic, I had seen their crucifix on the wall. And also we had a Bible book, Hurlbut's Book of the Bible, stories for children. And they had pictures, and I could see Jesus on the cross with his feet, one on top of the other, and his arms stretched out. So that was something that I would experience, what Jesus might have felt like on the cross, laying down on a wood floor that had the same wood going in the direction that I could just lay there and pretend that I was being crucified. So that was an occupation I enjoyed as a child. Yes, I've been trying to sort of figure out, and Sophia did a beautiful job in the comment section. Sophia de España, explaining the difference between hermit and a religious solitary, and mystic. She says she's not, although she's had the experience. She's had mystical experiences, which that's up to God to give to anyone. But she mentioned something, it's very good. Read it if you get a chance. And I want to even talk about it I'll include it in a talk about mystics, because she has it more delineated for me. I'm trying to understand myself a little better here. But they are totally given over to God. And it's like from early on. And it's something like, it's not like you really have an option. You don't feel like you have an option. You don't want an option. Just how you are. It's how you've always been. So I was thinking of that, remembering back when I was 3 or 4 doing that on the floor. And I remember writhing, and trying to wonder how painful it would be. I didn't take anything and stab myself. That was good. but I was really into it. And even as an adult, my mom said something. Well, she was her last year of life when she was in the nursing home, and I was wearing a gray jumper, and she says, well, she says, I don't know. She says, I didn't think that I'd overdone it with religious things in the home. Why you would be like this? And I didn't say anything. I said, well, no, you didn't, Ma. I reassured her she hadn't. We did have some children's books. I still have the one little book about Jesus. I just came across it the other day. A couple of books that I was fond of, especially the one. These two children and their book about Jesus. Just a little thin little booklet from the early 1950s. I was born in 51. But I remember that on the bookcase, the children. We had a lot of children's books, and she had, on the bottom row, there was, like maybe 3 or 4 books of Jesus, which were my favorites. So, but it wasn't read to us or anything. Or my dad, when he would be home, for a while, he would read the Hurlbut stories from the Bible. But that never followed through, so I tried reading it. I was a little bit young for it. It was small print, a big fat book, so I was maybe second grade or something. But I loved it. See, I loved it in a way that I realize now was more. I was born with it. And that's what I remember reading in that book by Dr. Knowles, that one from Cambridge, that expert on mystics and mysticism, that they're born with it, born with this disposition. So anyway, prophecy and visions. Peter was gifted with the gift of prophecy, of seeing what was going to happen in the future, and the discernment of spirits. I have a sense of people, but I don't have confidence with it. I don't trust in God enough with it. I ignore it. I fill my mind with other things, which isn't too smart. And prophecy, I can't say that I've, in some cases, but not generally, no. I could, but there again, I'm scattered. I'm very scattered. And, but LS, I'm sure did have the gift of prophecy. She used to leave comments. But it was, what I do is just, she didn't have time for what I do. She's so far beyond. And, I think Sophia and Gray Rocking and others, probably many of you are beyond what I yap about, way beyond me with any of my gifts that God has given me, which I probably am very disrespectful to God in that regard. He can't utilize me as much, probably because of my scatteredness. That's why I've got to get more disciplined, get on a horarium, and then if I need to adjust it due to pain or too much pain to get up at the right time or whatever, then that's one thing, but not because I haven't slept well the night before. There's no excuse for that. Apparition to St. Teresa. Shortly after his death in 1562, St. Teresa of Avila saw his soul being carried to heaven. He later appeared to her and told her, "O happy penance, which has won me such great glory." So not only could she see him go to heaven, but he went to her to tell her how wonderful it was and how much he loved it, that he was thrilled to be in such great glory. Ooh. Okay, let me get back to it here. Where the apparition of St. Teresa. Other gifts. He had gifts of tongues. During his missions, Peter was reported to have preached in his native language and been understood by foreigners. People from other languages could understand him. So that's something the Holy Spirit does. All these things the Holy Spirit allows. God allows, the Holy Spirit does the enacting, the actual enacting of it, of the miracles. Multiplication of food. He once multiplied a small amount of bread and wine to feed a large group of people. When Teresa met Peter around 1560, she was contemplating a new, more austere branch of the Carmelite Order, but was filled with doubts and faced with intense opposition, which she was, by her own fellow women. In fact, they were threatened to kill her and the 5 others that left with her. They were going to burn them. They were chasing them out with torches of fire out of the convent one night. So Peter's guidance to her was at a crucial turning point. Many of Teresa's early spiritual experiences, including visions, were met with skepticism by her confessors, who suggested they might be the work of the devil. But Peter, with his own deep mystical experience, immediately understood and validated her journey. He calmed her fears and assured her that they were experiences of God. Encouragement for her reforms. Despite the opposition, Peter encouraged Teresa to move forward with her plans for a new monastery. In a pivotal letter dated April 14th, 1562, he strengthened her resolve, which led to the foundation of her first Reformed convent, St. Joseph's in Avila, later that year. And that was right around from the old medieval building that a religious community was living in, where I stayed in my time at Avila. The St. Joseph's was right around the corner. It was a church, her first foundation. But it had originally been just an old building that the diocese owned. It had been an old building that was of the diocese that the bishop gave her because it was in such bad condition, he just let her have it. And that's where she had her first convent. And now it is a convent. I think it had been an old church that was in disrepair. So the bishop, was in favor of her starting. And he liked the idea that she was going to reform, because he knew that the Carmelites had turned into like a girls' sorority house, a woman's sorority. Validation of her spirituality, Peter considered Teresa's writings and her call for deep mental prayer to be masterful and aligned with the will of God. So she got people away from verbal prayer into deep mental prayer. Not just mental prayer, but deep mental prayer. She taught that. And then later would write and lead into contemplation and into the levels of prayer and the levels that the soul would go into. The castles, the interior castles, our spiritual progression in life that comes really from our communication with God, which is prayer. That's the only way we are going to progress, is through communicating with God, loving God. Our love relationship with God, in essence, is what it is. And from that, the way we communicate with the one we love. And what we do with our day and our time with the one we love. I've been squandering it. Or the way that we handle our lives, the way we handle our deaths, the way we handle our sufferings with our lover, God, our spouse, our maker, our husband. That's the relationship. And that's the spiritual growth, like a beautiful married couple. It grows deeper and deeper. We grow in love. And since we're married to God and He is pure love, we must learn His pure love. Then the relationship will be even more intense and more great. This is for anyone, for all of us. See, being a mystic doesn't matter. I hope you can understand that now. I'm just sort of trying to figure out why it was like my spiritual father and the first priest, when I just told them a few things. I didn't even go back into childhood. But they knew. They said, oh, you're a mystic, and what that label means for me and how to live it well for God. Because it's not for anyone else, really. It doesn't mean anything. It's nothing that you have to be or you should be or need to be. It's just like I used to think of it as an affliction. I was born with this affliction because there's so much suffering involved. Mystics have a lot of suffering. Now, Sophia thinks she's not a mystic. I guess she would know. But part of it, she explained, and it's right on, is that it's not a choice, really. This intensity of God, this things aren't a choice with a mystic. It is. You are. You haven't thought about it. You haven't thought about it as a choice. It's just who you are and how things are and how you approach stuff and what you feel, what you've always felt. It's how you were born. And you can't help it. You can't change. And you can't make it. You can't make yourself different than how you are. I've tried all different things, and you can't get rid of your, like if you have a mystical event, you can't get rid of it unless God takes it away. You don't ask for it, you don't submit to it, because you already belong to Him. There was never any point in time where you had made a choice because you were born. Now you make a choice as far as giving yourself to God totally, as like when you first become a contemplative or a Christian, you go through those motions. But with me, it seems sort of odd because I always was. So in 6th grade, when the Methodist Church had a little, for kids, for youth, high school on down, and adults could come too, but a revival, they called it, a youth revival. And they had these energetic speakers and evangelists and things, and they had an altar call. And I went down. It was a big deal to me. But, people were reacting and stuff, and I didn't. And that was because I already was Christ, see. But I didn't realize that, any of it. But there was nothing different. It wasn't, whereas other people would have some experience or sense something, or it was a big choice for them, a change of way of being. And I remember this family friend, she already had large eyes, and she was very expressive, very demonstrative person. And my family, we were all more reserved, And she came up to me later and put her arm around me and got her head right down in my face. And I remember her big eyes was bugging out at me and saying, oh, I know that you gave yourself to Jesus tonight. And how do you feel now? And I was sort of felt embarrassed, and awkward too. My family wasn't all that demonstrative. She was very hands-on and touchy and all, and my parents were more reserved. And in fact, they never said love. I was the one that started it after my divorce. On the phone, I worked up to it with my parents. I take them over a few months' time and finally said, I love you. And then they for a long time go, well, that took them back. Oh my, that was being very, very forward to say I loved them. That never happened in our household. And either way, and but I realized, that I should break through with this with them, because I was in love with my husband, and I thought it was a loving marriage until he started being cruel. But from my part, I was very loving, and I loved him, and I would say so. And at first, he would say he loved me and stuff, and at the end, he'd say he didn't love me. But anyway, and they would say, "Well, us too, us too." That they finally got courage to say that. And then toward the end, they were, like, "Yeah, we love you." Then I told my sisters, and "I love you," and they did with their, they were loving with their families. Our family, it's just the time period. Plus, we were repressed or something. Our family was repressed. It's just how it was, and more formal, reserved, and not emotive. But here was this lady who was. But later, I think I said something to her. I thought, well, I don't want to disappoint her. So I said, "Oh, yes, yes. It was very, very important. And oh, yes, life-changing or something." But no, I was the same. And now I look back on it, see, well, I always was, I was born that way. So it's just different. It's different. But Teresa she was a mystic, and Peter recognized these things. When Teresa wrote of his profound humility, asceticism, and gentleness, she noted that he was so extremely thin that he seemed to be made of nothing more than some gnarled roots. But he was very kind, though he spoke little, unless asked a question. But he was very thin because the asceticism was taking its toll. She felt a deep sense of understanding in his presence, writing that from the beginning, I saw that he understood me from experience, which was all that I needed. I see this is my spiritual Da. The very first time I met him and talked with him, it was like he knew me. I could tell him anything, even my worst sins. I even told him something that I did once. Sort of sickened him, but he understood. He understood, even though it creeped him because of the pain that it caused. But he understood why I had to give back to God what he had done. It was a sign back to God that I accepted what he did to me, what he had given me, that I had fully accepted it, and that I understood it, and that I was matching his action with mine in return. But my spiritual Da understood that. And I've only been able to see him once on the other side. We weren't allowed to talk, but we just stared at each other, just brief, but the love, the great respect and love. And Peter also shared his own struggles and spiritual insights with Teresa, creating a mutual support, respect, and support for one another. And that's what can grow of a beautiful spiritual father and child, or two people, two spiritual souls that God meant for each other. And at a certain point with my spiritual Da, he says, I'm no longer your spiritual director. And I was like, whoa, what? No. He says, you don't need me. He says, God is leading you now. And that was before God told me in my hermit life not to do the diocese. Why would you want that when you can have me directly now? For those of you who cannot find a spiritual director, and it's hard, and you've tried and tried, and you can't find one. It's because you can't find one because God wants to direct you now, and He has been directing. Somebody had just written that. I'm not going to say who it was, but it's because God is directing this person, this viewer. When you no longer can find one, I say Father Vincent is my spiritual director in place of my spiritual Da who passed away. But my spiritual Da had already said, might have been back in maybe 2010 or 2009, he says, we are from now on Anamkara. Maybe even before then. Anamkara. It means soul friend. He told me it's Irish for soul friend. He said, you and I will help each other spiral our way to heaven together. We will help one another. You guide me, I'll guide you, we'll share the guidance. And I never bought it, though. I mean, I said, no, I need you, but he meant it. He said, no. He says, I'm learning from you. He says, you're experiencing things that I can learn from. And God is telling you things that are helping me too. So he meant it. But I still relied on him. But in a way, he relied on me, and I let him down at the end in a big way. I overreacted to something. And then by accident, I got so busy with a situation I was in after the last time I saw him that I didn't write to him. And my daughter had my mail, and she didn't forward them for like 5 weeks, and I had notes from him apologizing and feeling so terrible, and please write to me. Don't let that come. And it hadn't come between us from my perspective. I was just on another assignment that was very intense and didn't think. And I didn't have writing paper, and I could have gotten some. I was just so in the moment with a situation. And then when I got my mail and found his letter and read them, oh dear. So I wrote to him then, though, and explained. But I lost invaluable time, because then he passed about 7 weeks later. And he was conscious. He got my letters, but I hope the gal read it to him. That was part of the problem. This woman had gotten very envious of his and my friendship. And she would read my letters, take my letters that would come, because he no longer could get his own mail or even read them anymore. His eyesight had gotten so bad. He counted on her, and I didn't realize it until I had visited him and realized what was going on, and that she was privy to anything I had written and resented me terribly and would keep things from him. So it got very treacherous, which happened. See, that's a trial toward the end of life too, that he had to undergo, and a trial that I had to undergo, that I couldn't even have any. And then when I went to visit him, she wouldn't get out of the room. She would not get out of the room. And I wanted just a few moments. I suspected it would be the last time I would ever see him. Just wanted some time alone. Finally, she did leave, but I had been rude to have it happen. And I gave him a hug, goodbye, and I said, could I kiss you on the cheek? And bless his heart, he just sort of shook. He says, please do. I have wanted you to give me a kiss for so long. He wanted that show of daughterly affection. because he was such a formal Irish, straight as an arrow, by the book, but he wanted a hug and a little kiss on the cheek. And so it was that was good, I guess. But then, see, I hadn't written to him, and he thought that because of me figuring out what this other lady had been doing, interfering, and so envious and sick, and he was so vulnerable he had to go along with whatever because he needed someone to help him. And it was a horrible situation. It was a crucifixion he went through, a persecution and a crucifixion. He was so holy that he had to go through what Christ went through. And with the religious sisters of the community had really mistreated him. He was cold for a while. And I got a letter from him about that, and I had to get strong and make some threats and make sure he had heat again and access to the thermostat. They were freezing him. It's cruel what they were doing to him. And I wondered what on earth was this lady doing then. But she didn't have the gumption, I guess, to demand. But I had to threaten. I was out on the island across the country. But I called their administrator and said that I played them. That it was like an accident, that somehow they didn't have money and that they wouldn't allow him to have any control over the thermostat in his room. And I didn't realize they had him in a terrible room on purpose. Away, they had a nice refurbished area for the health care, and then they had the old, and he was there by himself down a hall in his old, but he said he liked it. He said he liked it because he could be by himself and out of the way of the rest of them and out of the noise and the hullabaloo. He wanted to be left alone rather than harassed, I suppose. He never said a word against them. Never. Except he did write in his letter, and I found out then that he'd been freezing. He was cold, and they wouldn't give him any of his money. It was getting near Christmas time, and they withheld his money. So I see, just what happens. I shouldn't get off topic, but suffering and a holy soul like his, he had to go through his crucifixion. And that was all part of it. But he got heat because I acted like that they couldn't afford it. I said, oh, that's so sad. I said, I'm going to call the nearby city news stations, television stations, and tell them about this situation. This poor elderly priest, a priest nearly 72 years, and that he's freezing to death because where he lives, they don't have the money to have heat for his room. I said, he has so many friends in that whole diocese. And in the town, I said, people will be out there bringing him blankets, and I mailed him one. And one that you could plug in, but the lady would have to do it for him because he was chair bound, but recliner. His back was so bad, and he slept in it even. But I said they'll come, and you'll get money to get the heat turned on. And I said, oh, it'll just be an outcry of how he's been cold, and oh, Father Fahey, this, oh my goodness, the whole area will want to know this. And so I said, the news station will help you out. They'll make sure that he gets what he needs. Well, of course, they were doing it to persecute him. They were doing it out of cruelty. And I said, oh, and that he has no money. He says he has no money. All the money that people have given him over the years to help people. And so to think that he has nothing. I said, I've sent him money, even though I'm out, but I've sent him money, And somebody else lent me money, so I could. But I said, people will be giving him money right and left when they find out he doesn't even have money to buy presents for this lady who's helped him. And wow, they didn't want the news stations knowing. And I said, I'll call the local newspaper. They know of him. He's a saint to people in that town. And that got action. In fact, he had the lady give him the cell phone. He says, they even gave me some of my stipend. He says, it's a miracle. I didn't tell him what all I'd done. But wow, just what people will do. So St. Teresa of Avila and St. Peter of Alcantara, they encouraged, especially in their efforts to reform the Carmelite Order, and they really did a lot of good. There were doubts. Teresa had her own doubts about her own mystical fears and demonic deception and inner conflict over her desire for worldly approval. Teresa was really, we were getting into Teresa also because Peter and Teresa knew each other so well. That's probably why I'm going off on Father, because, we were on Alcantara. And Teresa had her conflicts and her concerns. She worried about her mystical experiences, and she was worried about how she was, what her situation was, what was going on. So doubts and confusion over mystical experiences. Following a powerful conversion experience in 1555, Teresa began to have profound mystical experiences, such as visions and ecstasies. However, rather than bringing her peace, these divine encounters caused her great confusion. The source of her visions, other people in the convent, and some of her confessors, as I said, were voicing it that they were from the devil. And you do need to be concerned to some degree, but not to the point where you become fearful and where you don't even trust God anymore. So don't let the devil frighten you into thinking that the source is of the devil. That caused Teresa to fear that her experiences were not from God, but were in fact demonic deceptions. And we're no good to God if we begin thinking we are demonic deceptions ourselves. Despite the wonderful delight she sometimes felt during prayer, Teresa, she also worried that she was being deceived. Also, she wrote that this fear made her seek out spiritual persons to consult. So, anyway, that was pretty much about Teresa and her experiences, and from Peter of Alcantara's viewpoint. And he was a wonderful spiritual director, but he did pass away, and she went on to live. When did she die? I think in 81, so maybe like 20 years more than he did. And John of the Cross became her spiritual guide for a year or two, and then he also, though, helped with the reform and was a spiritual director to her sisters for about a year, her convent. The main one that her most recent one was the one that they kicked her out of, that they ran her out. It eventually fell apart because everybody who really wanted to have a religious vocation, of course, wanted to be in one that meant something. Just like me when I became Catholic, they stand for stuff. They take stands and they have logical reasons and theological reasons for doing so, and they don't waver. I mean, on major scriptural things. So, and I like that. And I like that they took worship seriously. Of course, the Eucharist meant a lot to me. All of it, all of the sacraments. They mean business. And it's a never-ending treasure chest. There's always more and more to learn. And there's people to learn about who can help us. Like Peter of Alcantara. He was no nonsense. And Teresa of Avila was also. And that's why I wanted to share him with you, his life and his interactions with Teresa and his being a spiritual director and their relationship too. I wasn't expecting to talk about my relationship with my spiritual director that I had, but it's Father Vincent, there's rare if ever I have to ask him anything. I did talk over this thing with the diocese hermit stuff. And he just laughed and laughed when I went over this list of things the young priest expected me to be able to do. He knew I could, and he knew it was, double talk. It was double speak. It was, one thing one way that was like extremist, and the other was so loose it wasn't even hermit life. So, he just laughed. He's got a good sense of humor, filled with joy, but he knew that was, and he didn't even need to tell me, it isn't God's will. I knew it. He knew it. That's why he was, laughed. Thought the whole thing was, well, what are you going to do? Cry? It was sad. It was really pathetic. And I still should probably write to the bishop and say, please, if anyone else, requests diocese hermit approval, get a priest that's older and wiser and has experience and knows what hermits are and listens or even has time to meet the person. So anyway, but yeah, if you have looked and looked and looked for a spiritual director and can't find one, and you've even traveled some, willing to drive 30 minutes or even an hour to meet once a month or something, still can't get one, and even have asked retired priests or those in a monastery, then chances are you don't. And if you've been very religious and you've read a lot and you're capable of reading and you're motivated and you pray and you're already in contemplative prayer, deep into contemplative prayer, ask God, do you intend to be my spiritual director? Is that why I can't find one? There's none available to me. He'll probably say yes indeed, or give you some kind of a sign, or a dream or something, or a sense of peace about it. So that usually happens. And then you at least have a priest you can go to confession to if you have something, or get an appointment if there's something huge in your life that you truly do need to talk over with a human being. But by the time you don't need a spiritual director, you can talk everything over with God and you'll get a sense of peace or understanding once the situation is out with God and you've had some kind of an interior input that is peaceful. Then it's okay, I'm doing okay, or I've worked through the situation. Or there's any number of great spiritual directors of the past. Even this Blessed Dom Marmion, this Irish priest who went to Belgium and was an abbot in Belgium. And he's written Christ, the Life of the Monk, Christ, the Life of the Priest, Christ, the Life of the Soul. And those books are outstanding. I think it's, maybe it's not, yeah, I think it's of the monk, of the priest, and of the soul. Get Christ, the Life of the Soul. That'll lead you through. I've mentioned Tanqueray explains the spiritual life, plus the temporal, anything of the temporal of the church, but also the spiritual life, all levels of prayer. Teresa of Avila's Interior Castles. Read John of the Cross, his poetry, but read the big, huge section of writing that he did to explain the poetry. That itself is classic. And a lifeline of learning, of spiritual development and growth from John of the Cross, who's like the epitome of spiritual director on earth. Excellent. So, read The Three Ways of the Spiritual Life by Garrigou-LaGrange. He was the spiritual director of John Paul II, and also the spiritual director, the director of his doctoral dissertation. He was his teacher in seminary as well. So he's very sharp, he's very good, and he has written volumes of books, but The Three Ways of the Spiritual Life will take you from beginner all the way to advanced of spiritual life. That's a good one to read. And he has the short version and he has the fat version. Of course, I recommend the fat version, but you can start with the short version just to sort of work your way in if you're not up to the fat version, into the big kahuna book that he wrote. And his shortened version will give you the overview. And it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So God bless his real presence in us. And Peter Alcantara, October 18th. And he was important. I misspoke. I didn't read on fast enough to see. And when I'd read about him before, I didn't do an in-depth reading. I didn't do a word-for-word reading. I did more of what we would call a skimming. Scanning is even faster than skimming, but I did a skimming. So I'm going to ask his intercessions, ask him to pray for me, because he guided Teresa very, very well in her reform. And I need a reform. That's my bottom line today. That's what I'm getting out of all of this. Not only do I need an horarium it'll have to be loosely structured because of my existence, including having dogs when they need to go out and stuff. That's an interruption. But I need to have a reform. I need a spiritual reform of my spiritual life here. I'm floundering, I'm flaking. I'm like snowflakes fluttering and not ever getting any sleep. And I feel like even with the dogs, and they're picking up my turbulence, my haphazard turbulence. They're becoming that way, and it just adds to the bouncing around. The energy feels like it's just all bouncing around in here, and the mess, and I'm not attending well to spiritual. I don't feel or think. It's not just feeling; it's a knowing, and not to what God expects or wants of me, and what I want for God. It's what I want for God. And so I got to do a reform here. God, pray for me in this reform. So I'm going to ask him, Peter of Alcantara, to help, John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, ask all these people who are good with reforms, even St. Colette, because she helped with the reform of the Franciscans. Within 100 years of St. Francis dying, the Franciscans needed reform already. They had already fallen apart. So St. Colette was brought out, through a miracle, was forced out of her anchor hold, her anchorage. She was an anchorite, a hermit, that was literally walled in. She didn't have a doorway to get out. And Jesus had the whole wall explode because she kept refusing to leave. She could have crawled out a window. She had a window to the world for her maidservant to come and bring her food, and other people to come and ask her to pray for them and talk over spiritual matters, which she did not charge for, and which was limited in time by her godfather, who was an abbot. She could only do, I think it was 2 hours a day of people coming, which was a lot, I think. If I talked to anyone today. No, I haven't. Well, I don't think I did yesterday either. This is Saturday. I think Thursday I went to the bank, so I spoke to the bank lady to put some money in. So that was it. So there's no excuse. I've had time. God's given me time. He's given me solitude. He's given me silence. So I'm going to pray about the reform. I'll contemplate the reform. What kind of reform and to what degree? But the news, it's like talk. I don't even turn the noise on. It's like I hear speaking in the silence, So, so this is good. This is what this has led me to. I hope it's led you to something. God bless His real presence in us, and God loves us all, and we love you, God. We love you so, so much. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.